Welcome to the Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority's FY24 and 25 budget presentation. I'm Maura Thompson. I am the DDA's Communications Manager and Interim Executive Director. The DDA operates two systems, a downtown development system and a parking and transportation system. Within both of these systems, we have multiple funds. On the downtown development side, we have a tax increment financing fund and a housing fund. And on the parking and transportation side, we have a parking operations fund and a parking capital improvements fund. It's important to note that these funds are unlike a general fund. They're more like special revenue funds in that they have very specific purposes. We're going to talk through this presentation by dividing it into the two systems. So we're going to start by talking about our downtown development system. So a few key general assumptions on the downtown development side. TIF revenue is budgeted to increase 3.5% each year, and this is actually set by city ordinance. Back in 2017, council voted to limit the Downtown Development Authority's TIF capture to 3.5% per year. Taxable values within the downtown have increased an average of 7 to 8% per year. However, the DDA is capped at 3.5%. The other general assumption is that our expenses for both years will increase or are budgeted to increase by 4%. So our revenues, again, our TIF fund is funded by tax increment financing revenues. The housing fund is funded by transfers from the TIF fund. The housing fund is also, the increase each year is put in place by ordinance. It increases by 3.5% per year. The original investment was about $300,000 annually, and I think by 2024 we're hitting closer to $400,000 into that fund every year. And I'd also want to point out that the DDA's support for affordable housing is not limited to just the housing fund. Our TIF fund also supports affordable housing work in our downtown. One example of that is our Miller-Catherine Bikeway project, which was completed in the fall of 2022. Included over $1 million in utility investment for the Ann Arbor Housing Commission's project or upcoming project at 121 East Catherine Street. And we have another project like that in the pipeline, which we'll touch upon later in this presentation. So this slide is meant to illustrate the impact that TIF cap has on the DDA's revenues. And to orient you a little bit, the blue bars are the revenue that the DDA captures. The gray bars are or indicate the uncapped value, so the revenue beyond what the DDA captures. And you can see the current years, 24 and 25, are highlighted in orange. So if you look from 2017 to 2023, you can see that there was a total reduction in the amount of revenue the DDA collected of about $11 million. And you can see by those bars that amount just continues to escalate. So in 24 and 25, it's projected that there will be about $6.8 million above that cap. Also important to note that in the last 2 years alone, inflation has outpaced that cap by over 200%. So the increased cost of goods and services are also really limiting the amount of investment we can make in downtown. And then if you looked from 2017, when that cap was put in place, to beyond where this graph goes, so to 2030, the TIF revenues will end up being 50% of the uncapped value, which represents a loss of investment opportunity in the downtown of over $54 million. And now we'll take a look at expenditures. These are a combined average of 24 and 25 expenses. So the number is about $10 million, and this includes both TIF and the housing fund. And I'll first draw your attention to the purple slices of the pie. Those are our capital projects. You can see that's a big percentage of what we do. The peach is debt, and majority of that debt is previous capital projects. So our first Ashley, William, and Huron Street projects were bonded. So we are paying off that debt. There's also a piece of that debt that includes support for the city's debt on the Justice Center. Also for debt the city holds on the Y lot. And then another small piece of that debt is shared with our parking system. It's some of the debt on the Library Lane parking structure. If you remember, that parking structure was built with the anticipation of supporting development on top of the parking structure. So it seemed only fitting that the TIF fund share in the debt with the parking system. And then the pink slice is grants, which is mainly made up of our housing grants. So if you take grants, debt, and our capital projects together, you can see that about 88% of our expenditures are direct investments in our downtown. And the other interesting piece is that debt and grants, those are fixed allocations. So we have no flexibility with those expenditures. So, you know, as times get tight and we're looking for levers to pull, we are limited in the areas where we have flexibility. And now just taking a look at our expenditures in a little bit of a different way, kind of an overview here. For FY24 and 25, you can see a reduction each year in expenditures of a little bit over 20%. And this is just the nature of this type of fund. The expenditures correlate directly to our major capital projects. And in the years leading up to 24, we had multiple major projects underway each year. And this year, for 24 and 25, we're more limited in the actual capital construction projects that we'll have underway. So for the downtown development side, our major areas of focus and initiatives for 24 and 25, like all of the DDA work, our projects are value-driven and they are in support of community-wide goals. So goals of increasing our stock of affordable housing, carbon neutrality, Vision Zero, and of course supporting a vibrant and thriving local economy. So this slide shows the specific areas of focus that the DDA will have in 24 and 25. And you can see that most all of our work is in partnership and typically with the city of Ann Arbor. So the bars, the purple portion of the bar is DDA's investment. The yellow is the city's investment. These bars are not meant to show the scale of the project. They're just meant to show the funding relationship. So with the State Street project, we will be wrapping up this project in early fall of this year. This will be Ann Arbor's first curbless street design. We have permanent bicycle and pedestrian counters going in along the Ann Arbor Bikeway. The 4th Ave Transit Street project, this is actually a collaboration between the DDA, the City of Ann Arbor, the AAATA, and although they are not a funding partner, the Ann Arbor Housing Commission. The DDA will be undertaking utility work in support of the Housing Commission's project on 350 South 5th, or the old Y lot. The DDA also takes on about $500,000 in annual maintenance downtown every year. So things like pavers and tree grades and bike hoops, irrigation systems, kind of the things that are unique to our downtown. We ensure that those things are installed and operating properly. We also partner with the city on a streetlight replacement program downtown. We are currently working with the city administrator's office and other city staff on getting a public restroom pilot downtown up and running. We have a downtown circulation study that we will be beginning this summer. We have a downtown energy utility study that, although we are funding 100%, we are certainly going to be working with our colleagues at the Office of Sustainability. The Miller-Catherine Bikeway Extension, although that shows full DDA funding, that is referring to just the piece of the project that that is within the DDA boundary. So the DDA is taking on the portion of that project within our boundary between First and Chapin, and then the city is taking that Miller Bikeway extension further west. So that is a collaboration. We just happen to have the extension piece indicated in the slide. The North Main Street project, another collaboration, and finally in the CIP, we also have a downtown alley improvement pilot. And I just wanted to highlight the downtown circulation study and the downtown energy utility study are really two critical studies that we will be undertaking, and they will be providing recommendations and informing much of our work in the next few years. So now we'll move on to the fund balance in the downtown development side. So the fund balance brings together our revenues and expenses. That yellow dotted line shows our minimum fund balance at 25% of revenues. And you can see with this fund that we tend to build up fund balance and spend it down. And that is just the nature of this type of fund. We do a lot of major construction projects, so we kind of, build up to save for those projects. The less bonding we have to do, the better, and then we spend it down. So you can see that in 24 and 25, we still maintain a very adequate fund balance. However, in the outlying years, we get lean. And we know that we will not be able to accomplish everything we have in the capital improvements plan. And we know that our investments in downtown will be more limited due to our revenue restrictions and also the increasing cost of construction and goods and services. So now we're going to switch gears and talk about our parking and transportation system. So a few key assumptions in this system: we have parking fees budgeted at increasing 3% each year, 24 and 25, and general expenses 4%. Parking system revenues, the parking fund is funded through parking fees, which again, increasing 3%. We have budgeted at 3% this year. The capital improvements fund is funded from transfers from the parking fund. And the way that we budget in this fund is we budget to maintain fund balance and also to try to meet the capital needs in the parking system. So here's a little bit of a deeper dive into our parking fund revenues. So to orient you a little bit, the green are our parking revenues, and the gray indicates or reflects the loss due to the pandemic. So I'm going to first direct you to FY19. That was our last year of normal revenue. So we were up around $23 million. FY20, pandemic hit in March. So we had 3 quarters of full normal revenues, and that one quarter, that one small gray section when the pandemic hit. So we were still in, okay shape. We came in around, I don't know, $18 million maybe. But FY21 is our first full pandemic year, and you can see that the parking system was just decimated. Our revenues were cut in half. We had budgeted around 24. We came in at 12. You can see in 22, we started to see a little bit of a recovery. 23, a little bit more. We're at about 73% of pre-pandemic levels, and for 24 and 25, that's kind of where we're predicting. We always budget on the conservative side. We haven't seen any big fluctuations since we met that level at 73%. So you can see that the total loss for the system from when the pandemic hit in 20 is over $48 million. This is really significant for the city as well, given that 20% of those revenues go directly into the general fund. And the only other thing I would say on this slide For FY24 and 25, you can see we're around 21 million budgeted for revenues. If we're off, which we hope we are, we hope these are too conservative, and we come in a lot higher, we would be coming back to the city for a budget amendment. And that calls for, or goes for FY23 as well. If we end up coming in a lot higher, we would come to you for a budget amendment. This is good news, meaning we need an amendment so that we can pay the city that 20%. And we had to do this in FY22. So parking system expenditures. These are our FY24-25 and annual average at about 24.4 million, and it includes both parking and the parking CIP funds. So you can see operations makes up a really big piece of our expenditures at 47%. That yellow slice is the city's 20%, which for 24 and 25 budgeted around 4.2 million. And just for clarification, the city's 20% is 17% of expenditures. That can get kind of confusing when you look at that chart. And the most important piece of this is the purple slice. Those are our capital expenditures, and that slice is much too small. We need to do what we can to increase that number. Again, we base that on making sure that we stay in acceptable levels in our fund balance, but that number is too small. And here's another look at expenditures and overview. You can see that on the recurring side, you'll notice year-over-year increases. And this is really due to operations being cut during the pandemic. So our parking operator did a really good job of cutting back on expenses during the pandemic. They reduced staffing by about 30%. So we are working towards getting back to levels that are consistent with the current activity. You know, it was cutting back on our staffing during the pandemic. Although it was hard to do, you'd never want to let go of staff. But there wasn't the activity in the structures. There wasn't, you know, great demand to have as many staff as we need now. And then the one-time expenses, those are our capital expenditures mainly. That's that purple slice of the pie, and they need to be higher. So you can see in 24 we were able to bump it up from FY23 by 36%. But then we reduce it again in 25, and again, that's just trying to maintain an adequate fund balance. So major areas of focus and initiatives in the parking system for 24 and 25. We have a lot of exciting things going on. We've got a parking rate study. This is huge. The last parking rate schedule we did was in 2018. It was a 5-year schedule. It only included on-street and permits. The last increase in that schedule was July of 2022. And again, it included on-street and permits. So your hourly parking structure rates at $1.20 an hour have remained at that rate since 2012. So there will be some changes coming on the parking rate side. We also have a curb management study underway, and this is looking at a more equitable and effective way to allocate our curbside space, which is very valuable, and certainly the demand for curbside space has changed, you know, over the last 5 or so years. Parking structure fencing, we began this effort in 2017 and it's continued. We have about 20% of below rooftop levels that still need to be fenced, and we are working on that. We've also been working with community mental health on updating signage. So if you've recently been to if you park on the rooftops of structures, you'll notice we have some all new signage on the rooftops, and we're working on additional signage in our elevators and in our stairwells. And finally, maintenance. We do annual restoration and maintenance, and we also have a 20-year plan that guides this work. This 20-year plan is a critical tool in prioritizing repair and restoration in the structures. So we have engineers that come in and do an evaluation of all aspects of our facilities. So this was last done in 2020, pre-pandemic. So the current plan does not include all of the deferred maintenance and restoration that occurred during the pandemic. So during the pandemic, anything that was not critical was not done. So we really need that plan to reflect all of that work that was not accomplished. So this 20-year plan will be in the works and is going to be very important in combination with our rate study in looking at the years ahead. And now the parking system fund balance. So the parking system is made up of high value aging city assets. So it's really important that we maintain a very high fund balance. This dotted yellow line shows a minimum fund balance at 25% of revenue. We actually like to see it higher, but this is where we have it set. You'll notice that in FY21, there's a dip in that fund balance, and that's because fund balance is directly correlated to revenue. So 21 was the year our revenue was basically cut in half. So you see that dip in fund balance. We entered the pandemic, FY20, with a very high fund balance at $13 million, and that served us really well. And we worked really hard to maintain that fund balance over the next 3 years, not knowing how long the revenue disruption was going to occur, all of the uncertainties with the pandemic. We wanted to make sure that we were going to be able to maintain the parking system. 24 and 25, you can see we start to spend down that fund balance, but still maintain healthy and adequate levels. However, in outlying years, you can see where the challenges come in. And I know Mr. Tahoney has encouraged that we not stay frozen in our parking rate structure. And you can see this is a very wise philosophy, which is why this parking rate study that we're doing is just critical, and it's going to help us set the course on a rate strategy that ensures that our downtown has a safe and accessible and sustainable public parking system. So now we're just going to talk super brief about how the DDA's budget fits into the city's budget. So the DDA's budget process is outlined in state statute. Where we are currently is right in the middle there, that blue square with the orange halo. From there, the city will complete its budget process, and the DDA budget goes back to the DDA board and must be adopted by the beginning of our budget year, and this is required by law. And that is all I have. I thank you for making it through to the end of this video. As with all of the budget presentations, should you have any questions, please direct them to Sarah Higgins at shiggins@a2gov.org, and we will be happy to get you answers to any questions. Thank you so much.